So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ciara Garvan, Ed Burke and Becky Dyer. Ciara, do you want to start with a bit about yourself and your background?
Sure, okay. My name is Ciara and I'm old enough to have done tech when tech wasn't cool. Okay, so that gives you an idea. I did a Masters in Computing in Bolton Street nearly 20 years ago. And I worked in different multinationals and eventually I left and I started my own company. And my company is Work Juggle, and we have a tech platform and we connect people to remote contract and flexible work. And we also do some training, which you were asking me about earlier, so that's me.
My name is Ed, and I'm a founder of a company called Remigo. It's all about matching like-minded housemates, basically. I call it Tinder for housemates. So it's about people with like similar interests, hobbies, and lifestyle choices connecting on the platform and finding each other. And then they might go off and rent an apartment together, or they might find a spare room on the platform. I'm actually a lawyer by training, but I found law a bit really boring. So I always had a dream that I wanted to do my own business, and I was searching around for ideas basically for a few years and dabbling in different things, and then I got the idea for Remigo, and I set it up in Dublin, and here I am now.
Cool. So my name is Becky. I'm heading up the training function at Adroll, which is a division of Nextroll. We're a marketing technology platform. So I started my career in Oracle back in the day. I started in a business development role and went into sales. I thought marketing was what I wanted to be great at, so joined their sales programs team. And ended up training the sales team on a lot of things, and actually worked out, oh look, actually this training thing is kind of cool, I like it. So fell into that world and have grown in it ever since. So yeah, now I'm working at Adroll and running it.
Thanks, guys. So Becky, I'll start with you. As you said, you're the head of training for Garvan. You must have a lot of experience in training people who are resistant to training or unwilling to take on the responsibilities you're training them in. How did you get past this kind of wall with these people, or have you any tricks or anything like that?
Yeah, it was never really tricks, really. You definitely always have people who are going to be reluctant to join the classroom, and normally it's because they don't really understand the benefit of the training, and that's really important. Like if you're walking into a room to be part of a training or to participate in something like that, you need to know that it's going to be valuable to you and that you're going to bring value. So often what I'll try to do is, if I get the sense that somebody doesn't understand the value of that training, I'll speak to them. But if they also have experience, so if you're bringing a really seasoned sales rep, for example, into a sales training environment, I'll always try to include them in the learning of it, in terms of bringing them into teaching their peers and getting them involved from a peer level, because that will always get their engagement up and show that they're bringing benefit both ways.
Yeah, and on that, like, is there any ways like to keep a team motivated when you're trying to train them, or?
Oh, engagement. I think engagement for sure. Yeah, I think gone are the days of going into a classroom for 8 hours, and those full day trainings just don't really add a lot of value anymore unless you are breaking it up with activity and application. So I mean, learning theory dictates that we really learn by doing. So having that participation and application part of the training is really, really key. So a small amount of theory, engagement and practice is really key to getting that engagement.
Yeah, cool. And so when you were like new to the team, how did you new to the leadership team, say, how did you get people to accept your ideas when you were they might have thought you were too young or maybe too inexperienced in their role? Maybe anyone want to pick up on that? Becky, you want to start?
If you want to hear.
No, you're good.
So I guess when I started, they didn't think I was that young, unfortunately. But I was new. It was novice. So, no, I'm lucky enough to be part of a leadership team that are super open and foster a real environment of creativity. So irrespective of what level you're at, it's always going to be ideas first. So it's very open, and there's a couple of people here that work in the organisation, so they can back that up. But it's definitely the type of environment that just fosters that openness and creativity and fosters those ideas. So that has never really been an issue, but I think in any leadership role, influence is a big part of it, and just building that relationship and establishing yourself with credibility in your area helps you build that influence, I believe. Well, I'll let Ciara net.
No, I remember when I was younger, having people who were much older than me report into me. And I remember sometimes as well, sometimes somebody who's also gone for the same job reporting into you. I think that can always be a really tricky one. And I think the only way you can really manage it is just by being like unbelievably fair and being, you know, just really fair and treating people with lots of respect and just, you know, I suppose working with people as well. And then I think if you're reasonable, I think it'll grow over time. And when I think of those people now, like we would still all be friendly, you know, and there's no issue. But it was certainly for me, the first time somebody's reporting to you and they have grey hair and you're much younger, it does feel awkward. Like, of course it feels awkward, you know? But I think it is just being really equitable, and that's it.
Yeah, a lot of our speakers before said it's about powering through on your actions and showing that you're actually able to do what you're saying you're doing. So that's one way of doing it. So Ed, back to yourself. So you recently moved from full-time to running your own business. How did you manage that transition, about that one?
Well, I think I really wanted to do it, so I actually moved back from Singapore to Ireland. I was working full-time in Singapore, so it was actually kind of a nice transition for me because I couldn't keep my job in Ireland from Singapore, so I had to quit my job. And when I came back to Ireland, then I just decided, you know, to start Remigo. I was thinking about getting a job initially, and my initial idea was maybe I'll get a job and I'll, you know, try to do something on the side. And then people were sort of saying, well, look, if you get a job, you're not going to do it properly. So I think if you want to start a startup, I think you kind of have to do it full time. For the initial few months, you can research the idea to see if there's an idea there. But when you actually want to do it, if you want to do it properly, you know, you kind of just have to do it, and then you just jump in, and I guess you sink or you swim, I guess.
Yeah. And so both of you are involved in your own startups, more or less. What? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, well, I did it a bit differently actually. So I did work as I started my startup, like 2 days a week, doing, actually it was training. Actually, I was training for somebody else 2 days a week, and in one sense it was slower, but in the other sense I just needed the money, to be honest. Like, I needed money and I needed to pay other people to do things I couldn't do, and that was worked for me. So I think you can do both to a certain extent, and it depends on your level of funding and what kind of funding you've access to as well.
And speaking of startups, so like you've worked with other startups, Ed, in your time as well. What's the kind of common issues between your own experiences and other people's experiences? What's the roadblocks they hit first, they focus too hard on? Or
well, I kind of have the experience of living in Singapore for a few years, and now back in Ireland, so I've kind of got to know about the startup space in both cities. And I think people commonly have the same problems and same issues. I think one of the things is just to get a product out there as fast as possible. I think way too many startups, they spend way too long on business plans and planning. Just get a product out there and try to get what we call product market fit. And I think you can do that as well. Actually, one of the other things is I think people spend too much money initially. You can usually get a product out there relatively cheaply. If it's a website, you can get a WordPress website or something just to try to test your concept with your target market. And I think from my experience in Singapore and here, like, the technical challenge is a big one for most of the startups I know, particularly for the non-technical founders. So I think the key lesson basically I would take, and I think most of my friends and the other startups that I know would take, is get a good technical advisor very early on, like a really good technical advisor. And ideally like a CTO co-founder, but if you can't get that, get a technical advisor.
Your own thoughts on your startup?
Yeah, so I suppose, I think it is, I think you're right, product market fit. I think, like, I built my first website myself. It's ridiculously easy to build a website these days. Like, it's just anybody, we could all do it here this evening and leave with something, you know what I mean? So sometimes people put kind of, I think, mental blocks in front of themselves. Oh, I have to do this or I have to do that. In actual fact, a lot of it is just go out and do it. The other thing I see is, and this always wrecks my head, is like, getting funding is not an achievement. Getting customers and making revenue, that is an achievement. Do you know what I mean? Like, people are like, oh, they raised, like, look at Plink, do you know what I mean? Oh, they raised so much money, they did, like, that's a skill, and it can be useful for lots of tech organizations, but it's not in itself what's going to lead to a successful company. And I think sometimes, if you're not careful, you can go on these kind of like funding rounds and never actually spend all your time doing that and never actually speak to a real customer. Yeah. And it's much nicer to be in a funding round sometimes than speaking to a real customer, because a real customer will tell you something you don't want to hear. You know?
Becky, you've spent most of your professional career at 2 companies. When you're you like the company you're working in and you want to stay there, how do you move up through the ranks? How do you know that move you're going to take within the company you're in is the right one career-wise for you?
Great question. Yeah. So I apparently like long-term commitment when it comes to work. So I'd like to stay in companies for a long time, which I know is unusual in the tech world now, because what I see now is people joining our organisation and maybe after 11 months determining themselves as a guru in that said area and saying, well, it's time to move on. And I'm like, what? There's so much to learn. Like, you've so much opportunity. What are you thinking? So from my perspective in Oracle, I was really lucky to be able to leverage the network that I had in terms of when I was interested in something, picking out mentors within the organisation that show me the ropes in that arena. And generally, if you're looking for somebody to be a mentor, they will mentor you if you ask them. People are often flattered or interested to learn both ways if you ask. So all it takes is just to ask somebody. And that's where it started for me in Oracle. I asked somebody in the sales readiness training arena to mentor me in that area, and ultimately I got my goal. I started getting given projects and getting involved in certain aspects of the role that were outside of my core. You'll always need to perform in your core. But as a result of that, it landed me in that arena, and that's kind of how I've navigated it ever since. It's really just, you'll only ever get the job based on experience, but you can only ever build the experience by getting familiar with people who have the experience and getting the opportunity to try and adapt those skills.
Yeah, a lot of people wonder how you, like, one thing is that you've got to make it known that you're willing to move to this role.
Oh, yeah.
You want that role, you have to tell people or they might not know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You need to make it known. I think having a good, you don't need to know where you're going to be in 5 years, but you need to understand what are the parts of the role that you're doing that you enjoy, and where could that lead you in the future, and that's really, really important.
Yeah. On the topic, I'll be out to you guys after this question. So on the topic of mentorship, that's one I ask a lot for most of the meetups. How do you find the right one, or how it's fairly daunting for someone to just go up and ask some random person in your office, can you be my mentor, or will you be my mentor, just in case I don't say no, fear of rejection. How do you find the right person? Because sometimes they're not the right person that could mentor you, they're not in the right role. Any thoughts on that?
So I have to say, mentorship has become this huge thing over the last 10 years maybe, but like 15, 20 years ago when I was starting out, it didn't really exist. Do you know what I mean? Now it's this huge, I mentor people and they mentor me, and you know, sometimes I do wonder, is there an over-reliance? And I know nobody else thinks this, but this is what I think, so I'm just going to put it out there. Sometimes you can have this over-reliance on having mentors, and just need to be careful that, I don't know, sometimes I feel people think a mentor is going to make everything good for them and open all the doors and stuff like that, and sometimes you're going to have to open those doors yourself, you know? Yeah. So that's just something I'm cautious with. Now, in saying that, since I started my own business, I do have my own mentors and I find them great. And I think it's okay to work with people for a period of time and then work with other people, as long as you're open about that, you know, some people, they'll bring different things to it, but I think with my mentors, the one thing that they have in common is they're like real cheerleaders. And so sometimes when you're having like, you know, a low day, or you're thinking, how are we going to get there? They are the ones who are saying, no, this is brilliant and you can do it. And that to me means a lot, you know? So I think that to me would be a good mentor.
Inspiration.
Yeah, energy, yeah.
Like I have some thoughts on a mentorship, and also career development and choosing the right career. On mentorship, I find mentors are super important, but you just want a few mentors, people that are objective, that you can trust. So today, actually, before I came here, I met a mentor of mine out in Blackrock. I hadn't seen him in 6 months, and it was really interesting. He's more experienced than me and older than me, and he's an entrepreneur. So it was really interesting just to get his objective and honest feedback, because that's what you want. You don't want people telling you, oh, you're doing a great thing, or you don't want negativity either. You just want people to give you like objective, honest feedback that can just step back from everything. Because when you're in a startup, it's almost like being in a little bit of a bubble, and you're trying to do everything. So it's good to get that objective feedback. Just there on another point on career development and stuff, I think startups actually can be really good if you're not sure what you want to do. So I actually, a guy that used to work for Remigo, he was a great guy, and before he actually worked for Remigo, he was in marketing, and I said, look, come and work on Remigo with me. So he came to work for Remigo, and he's actually totally changed his career now after working with us, because he came at a stage when we actually didn't have a product in the market, and he found that he actually really liked the product development aspect, where you're like engaging with the developers and you're creating, like what happens in tech is you create stories and you basically get the developers to kind of implement what you want, and it's a unique skill. And he actually, after he worked for Remigo, he got a new job as like a product manager, and if it wasn't for like that experience in a tech startup, he probably would have never thought about doing that. And I think that's one of the great things about a startup, is you can go into a startup and you kind of do a bit of everything. You sort of have to, and you might just find like you're like from a marketing background, but you actually love product development, or you know, whatever aspect of a business you're going to do in a startup. And I think that's the great thing about a startup. And if you really like it, you can actually get really good hands-on experience, and then you can take that like with you to, you know, to your next job and potentially move to a new role. Because I think the key for any job is trying to find what you really love doing and what you're passionate about doing. So startups are good for it.
Cool, thanks. We got anything out there? Yep.
I've got a question. So I really like the talking about feedback. I'm just curious. So Ed, that's fantastic. For you guys, how do you get feedback on your gaps as leaders and kind of develop on that from your peers or whoever?
Who you go?
So I suppose asking for it. I work really closely with my boss, and we have a great relationship, great trust there in terms of high trust, and she's well able to give that objective feedback when I have that tunnel vision on. Sometimes I can be overly optimistic on situations, but she's great at landing that realism, saying, okay, this is the story. I'm like, okay, you're probably right. So I think asking for feedback is really important. And I think generally I'll sometimes go to an external coach myself as well, which I think is really important. It's not for everybody, but it's definitely something that I like to do. It just helps you kind of reflect on situations and create that self-awareness. You know, that's like the greatest agent of change, really. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I think when you run the company yourself, it is harder to get feedback because it just is, you know. But I think when we look at issues or problems we're having, it's always very, there's no blame, you know what I mean? And I think that's really important to me, that we don't have a blame culture, you know, and that people are, I always say, and we can make any mistake in the world, it is only technology. You know, we are not doing open heart surgery. There is really, anything can be deleted, and I'm not going to, you know, feel free to make a mistake. And I think people do tend to respond to that. So.
Yeah, because it is difficult to give feedback. Say if one of your managers maybe takes too long at meetings or kind of waffles a bit, it's kind of hard to tell them that that's the problem. Yeah, you got to just go at it the right way, I suppose. So Ed, I'll go back to you. So, and probably Ciara as well. What over the next year and a half, what do you focus on? Do you focus on product development, or do you customer growth, or what are you hoping to do?
Well, I'm going to be actually focusing quite a bit on product development, because I basically, the platform came out in June of 2018, and initially I focused like quite intently on getting users onto the platform and trying to build a critical mass in Dublin, and then actually trying to learn from the users, trying to figure out what's working, what isn't working. So I've gone through that process, and I think we have good brand awareness and traction now in Dublin, particularly amongst the expats. So we want to obviously, like, I want to keep and growing the community, but at the same time, there's a lot of product development that I'm going to be focusing on doing, over the coming year.
Yeah, and I suppose, to be honest, product development probably the second half of this year, but I think for us, in a lot of ways, like startups are hard, but I think it just gets easier as well. And I kind of feel we've reached that critical point where things are just, people are recommending us and we're getting repeat customers and all that. Whereas I think at start to get your first customer is so hard, and your first invoice, it's so tough. And now I kind of feel we're at the other end of that a little bit, and people are coming back to us a second or third time, and that's so much easier, and it's so nice, and that's what I like. And I suppose for me, I kind of want to be big enough that the tech all looks lovely and that there's enough people using the platform, but small enough that all our customers, that we still have a personal relationship with people, and that people can call us, and we do lots. We do a community event every month, and we run re-entry workshops and different. So for me, it's really important to do all that side of things as well.
So another hot topic, I suppose, today is trying to get more women in STEM subjects and keep them moving on into the professional careers in tech. Is there any ways, apart from the normal ones like the hackathons and the quarter dojos, how are you're partaking these days to get more women into tech around those areas?
Okay.
I kind of jumped that one on you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, I worked with lots of women when I worked in tech, there were lots of women in tech. I think it's, so much is culture. So for example, I would work with companies who say, we really want to get more women in, and so you bring in this woman and she may have just had a baby, and they're like, so can you meet us at Monday morning at 8:30? And you're like, do you have any concept how difficult it is for a woman who just gave birth to be in your office for 8:30 on a Monday morning? Because if you don't understand that, you're not going to understand the different challenges she's facing. So I suppose, to me, I love technology, right? But at the same time, there's different cultures that have come on board that I just don't think are massively helpful, and those would be like a real long working hours culture, which I think can go against people. I also think, this real kind of, frat house culture, or everybody beanbags, I'm allergic to them. There was never a requirement to be able to code and sit on a beanbag at the same time. But we just seem to have bought into this, and things have really changed, and I just don't think they've necessarily changed for better. And I think tech is at a really critical time. When I, think people are questioning, there was a heading in the New York Times there recently, and it was which is the least evil big tech company to work for? And that was terrible. I could never, those started with such hope and such optimism. And sorry, I don't think I've asked your question about women, but I do think it is all around culture, and it's all around sort of that even playing field as well. So
Yeah. So part of that, culture is a big thing as well. But it's tough sometimes for the people who are trying to find a new job to understand what the culture might be like in that company that they're interviewing for. One of our previous speakers had a good tip where she got there 20 minutes early to the interview, and she kind of sat down at the reception, sussed out how people talk to the receptionist, is everyone friendly in the area. That was her trick. Is there any other kind of ways that you're able to find out, apart like Glassdoor and stuff like that, how you find out what companies are like to work for?
I normally reach out to my network if I have people working there, because you'll always, especially if it's a company in Dublin, it's so small, the network there, you're going to know somebody who knows somebody who might know somebody who works there, and you'll always be able to reach out and find out, and get a general pulse of what it's like to work. Yeah. And I've had people reach out to me about my company as well that have been interviewing, so. Yeah, I think it's a good way to do it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and that whole interview process and how you're being treated throughout that whole interview process is a really good signal, what I mean? And who's interviewing you, and sometimes we had a crowd that they would ask somebody a technical question up until the point they couldn't answer the technical question anymore. That just didn't feel like a great process to me, in terms of how are you going to be like to work there, So I think, there's loads of little signals in that whole interviewing process that can kind of red flag.
Yeah, and how do you build a better culture in the workplace you're already in? It's another one, like, there's a way about it.
So it's a big question.
Yeah.
I think it's never down to one person. If it is, that's not a great culture. But I think it's about, I suppose, bringing your values to the forefront and just, acting with integrity, honesty, transparency, and encouraging your team or people around you to do the same. Like, there's exercises that we do as part of like sales kickoffs and such, where we'll get a team to reflect on, okay, well, how are we working together, and what are the behaviours we're actually holding each other accountable to? And these are everyday behaviours, so that you can kind of work with that in mind on a daily basis, and hold that at the back of your mind when you're speaking to people, in terms of treating everybody the same and treating everybody with respect. And I mean, it's stuff that you don't think should need to be said, but funny enough, like, someone's having a bad day, it might need to be said. So yeah.
Yeah, Ciara, you've recently been talking a lot about called unconscious bias. Do you mind explaining a bit about what that is and how that affects the workplace?
Sure. So I suppose, there's been lots of really interesting research over the last 10 years about unconscious bias, and how we can just make very quick, snap judgments about who we like and who we trust, and that we're naturally drawn towards people we have an affinity to, or who are very similar to us, and it can be harder for us to reach out to somebody who's less like us, and how sometimes in organisations that can lead to a lot of people who not just look alike, but who think alike. And I think, again, what's really interesting in the tech space is, I was just reading Super Pumped, the story of Uber. Did anybody read that? It's absolutely brilliant book. But it's all about, like, Uber they all just hired people who were just like themselves, and then hired a really small HR department. Did you read it? No, it's brilliant. It's brilliant, right? Okay, so, and it's how those cultures were just let go rampant, and like really shocking behaviour that ultimately led to the company losing millions and the founder being ousted. So, and I was talking about the FAI as well, in terms of that, in order that for a good organisation you need a little bit of stickability and people getting on, but you need to be really careful that cultural fit is just not, I like to have a beer with this person. You know what I mean? Because that can be a way of weeding out people who are different to yourselves. And again, increasingly the research is all around, like, you need those different people thinking differently around the table, and that can be really hard to do. And I was using the FAI as an example, and how people essentially were, now I really don't know a lot about football, but I just think the FAI is an interesting example, because they were just very similar, and anybody who dissented, like, that was the end of their career, and now ultimately the FAI is in so much trouble, and it's the end of the FAI, and all these people who are like volunteers and who've been on the sidelines, they're the people who are going to suffer. So I think it can be, I think culture is like, and when we have candidates coming to us, the number one people are asking about is culture and values, and what is it like to work for, So it's just incredible to me how often people get it wrong, like really smart people can just get it really wrong.
And I suppose part of the culture is the people that you're hiring as well. So, like, when you're hiring new people, what's the one trait that you would hope to see from an interview candidate?
Well, I suppose it's different. I mean, if I was hiring from my company in the morning, it would be somebody who can do lots of different things, because it's a startup. So somebody who could, do a bit of this and a bit of that, and who I think has that, who isn't scared. That's what I look for. I look for people who, like, make a mistake and not be worried about it, because that's what I want. I want people to make mistakes, and then we'll all just move on together. But a startup, I think, is a bit different. So.
Yeah, I mean, like, in a startup, you just need people that you can trust, that are straightforward, and basically kind of self-starters that get stuck into a bit of everything.
I think from my perspective, in the nature of the role is you're acting with so many different stakeholders. Somebody who's able to build engagement with lots of different individuals, but also be very kind of have that growth mindset where they're able to be open to a lot of feedback and take, because the nature of training is, and as you probably well know, is you build a program, you'll get feedback from all the stakeholders, and you'll go back and build it again and again and iterate. It's all iteration and improvement. And somebody who has that mindset, almost like the lean startup mindset of, like, go, iterate, improve.
And conversely to that, what's the trait that you would try to avoid in a person? So like a lot of times they might be a really hard worker, but they might just not get on with everyone, or they're toxic. So something like that, what would you say is the opposite, basically, of what you're not looking for?
I think for me it would be someone who's quite the lone wolf, you know, a person who may not work well with others. I think when you're in a high stakeholder relational role, you'll need somebody who is open to collaborating with others and compromising, and somebody who maybe does not have that skill set wouldn't be a fit.
Yeah, and I think as well, and I've heard this from so many different people, you sort of have to go with your gut.
Yeah.
Like, I think throughout my career, when I haven't gone with my gut, I've made the mistakes. That's when you make the mistake. So I think just flexibility is probably, I think, the most important thing. If someone is just very stuck in their ways, that person can become almost impossible to work with. So I just think, you know, flexibility and going with your gut.
Yeah, I suppose for me, anybody who's too like that in the start, we need somebody who will maybe think outside the box. So somebody who for me is used to working in a big corporation and likes all the processes and rules that come with that, they probably wouldn't be a fit for where I am at now. You know?
And Ciara, you said yourself that the reasons for starting work juggling was that you could find a work that works for you, find somewhere that was flexible. How do you manage to help people do this in work juggling? How do companies become a flexible company workplace?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose, so some companies can be flexible, they just don't realise they're flexible. They're just like, oh yeah, of course you can start a bit later or whatever. I suppose what we do is we run workshops sometimes in terms of how to look at just things like a job spec and really look at the job spec and think, is this or has this job spec been copied and pasted for the last 10 years? Or is this really what this job does now, you know? And we look at them to look at what are the skills, and we work with a lot of startups as well, because sometimes people just need somebody 3 days a week, or they just need somebody at month end. And it's just about, you know, taking a pause and thinking about what actually needs to happen, and thinking about your talent differently. You know, your talent is not just the permanent people who live in the building, but your talent can also be people whom you call on a few times a year or different times of the month.
Cool. Yeah. Is there any questions over here? Yeah.
Just to backtrack to culture building, in particular when you're looking at improving the culture for women in tech, do you have any recommended readings or any pointers in that direction?
Yeah, I suppose books that I enjoy would be like, so Helena now this isn't tech, but Helena Morrissey, A Good Time to Be a Girl, I think that's quite a good book. Mary Portas, Work Like a Woman, I think that's another good book. I have to confess, I've never read Lean In, which is like Sheryl Sandberg's book. Yeah, I think, you know, I think the culture, it's not just about having a good culture for women, it's about having a good culture for everyone there, you know, and it's that people, there's that transparency piece that you were speaking about, but it's also, you know, what's getting rewarded in your organisation. And if acting like an asshole is what gets rewarded, then guess what, everyone's going to act like that, you know, so, yeah.
Just on that, so we have on the website, so all of our speakers that we've had so far, I asked them for book recommendations, or they have some of the YouTube channels or podcasts, so there's a list on the website there, on the cards and receipts of all the different books. I'll ask you guys for years after this as well, so we can post those ones. So that there's a lot of good recommendations, all different types of books, podcasts, even some YouTube channels for like further learning. So that brings me on to my next point. Is there anything outside of the office that you do to continue your, I don't know, personal development, anything like that, Becky?
Yeah, I'll always look at podcasts and books. I'm a bookworm for sure. So further reading is definitely, I'll give you some recommendations.
Yeah.
And yeah, podcasts, I love listening to TED Talks daily, just because it's such a myriad of topics, of things that you're just, it's not to do with tech, but it's just things that you're never really gonna go listen to, you know, proactively. So it can be surprising. I think that's a really, really good way to learn. And then generally in the core, I'll always just try to take further courses if I can. Yeah.
I think the work-life balance thing is really important. And just from going through my journey, I remember like the summer of 2018, it was just hectic, like constant working around the clock. I was smoking, and I actually think I was driving myself almost downwards. So I realised actually like you need to have quite a balanced lifestyle, and if you've got a more balanced lifestyle, it actually makes you more productive in work as well. So that was just something I had to kind of learn and adjust. Is like, okay, you're spending way too much time like doing a startup all the time. You need to like take breaks, and then you're actually much more productive. So like going to the gym, for example, I find that to be like a great stress reliever, and it just makes you feel a lot better. And I like to listen to podcasts as well. Actually, I listen to Joe Rogan. I don't know if anybody.
Yeah.
I think Joe Rogan's great. Like, it's nothing to do with like startups, but it's just he's got such a diverse range of people that come on, and sometimes it's really interesting. So I pretty much listen to that all the time.
Yeah, and yourself.
So podcasts and stuff?
Oh, well, just anything in general, I suppose.
Okay, well, I don't. So, like podcasts that I think are really good are if you're thinking of starting your own business, the How I Built This with Guy Raz.
Yeah.
Does everyone say that?
Yeah.
I just think he's brilliant, and I love his voice. I can listen to his voice all day. And then the other one I really like is How to Fail with Elizabeth Day, and I think that's really, you know, she has quite high profile on, and they all talk about their failures, and I just really, I just think it's great. So that's what I listen to.
Cool. So I'll get back to the tough questions again.
Okay.
So was there any time, maybe I'll start with yourself, where you felt like you were in way over your head, and how did you like get past it?
Yeah, I have definitely. I think I've had periods when I've been over my head, and I think an old boss of mine used to say that if there's no pain, you're not learning, you know? And so sometimes I used to think, well, I'm learning a lot. But I do think sometimes, you know, work is full on and you have to put in the hours, and in those instances I would have put in the hours, and I think you always have to have your end goal in mind, you know? I remember once being in a very difficult situation at work, and I was just like, well, this is, and I probably knew I was going to leave, do you know, that way? But I was like, well, I'm going to leave on this timetable because this is what I need. You know, you need to say, how are you going to get through a certain period of time? You know, like, because otherwise it's just not manageable, I don't think. You know, it's not sustainable, so.
Sorry, what's the question now?
Yeah, just was there any time where you felt way in over your head, and how did you overcome
Oh yeah.
that?
So I mean, I was just going back there, maybe like to my startup, and I just found myself like basically working around the clock, just as I was saying a few minutes ago, and that makes you more stressed then, and that can kind of I realised, okay, so you just need to have a better work-life balance, and I think that was incredibly helpful to me. Like, you don't need to be thinking like about your business 24/7. Yeah, it's really important to work hard. Like, don't get me wrong, you have to work really hard, but it's just like you need to be able to. I found that like if I, you know, go to the gym every second day or 4 times a week or whatever, that helps a lot, and just keep going no matter what. Like, it's not going to be that important that you have to just keep on working in your startup all the time or whatever job it is. So it's just
Yeah, I'd agree with both. Normally it's about, you do need to, there are going to be times that work feels like, oh my god, I can't do this. It's like, it's so busy and there's no end in sight, but it's about, to your point, it's about making that end be in sight and understanding that, yeah, okay, I'm going to need to work hard, this is how it is. And I would have gotten it from, I used to run events for a sales readiness team in Oracle, and that would be a really busy planning season, which you kind of knew when you were going into it. It was like, and each year it's like, it won't be that bad this year, and then you're into it and you're like, oh my god, what have I done? But you're like, okay, I just know that, you know, I just need to do this for a certain amount of time, and then there's light at the end of the tunnel, and then it seems so much easier. Because, and then also to Ed's point, taking a step back and putting it in perspective, because when you're in it, it's hard to see the wood from the trees. It's hard to understand. You can inflate the amount of work that you need to do, and the stress can create this sort of blind spot that like all you see is work. So I think taking a step back and step away from it can help you understand, actually, logically, I only need to do this, this and this in the immediate. and it helps you to arrange your mind a little bit better. So yeah, that's how I've done it.
Yeah, cool. And so there's a stigma, well not stigma I say, for people who think leadership, they immediately assume people managers and say, oh, you're going to have to manage people, that's it. But there's other paths into leadership if you don't want to become people manager, which a lot of people don't. How would you kind of, what other kind of ways can you get into leadership that is something like that?
Well, I definitely think management isn't for everybody, and it shouldn't be the end goal either, particularly, and again I'm going back to tech, but like I know when I worked in Microsoft you could be an individual contributor or a people manager, and I also thought that was a really good way of rewarding people who were very technical and just wanted to do the tech and not forcing them into being managers, you know. So you could do that, or you could do the people manager, and I think having those two streams is really good. Like it's not for everyone, not everybody enjoys it, and I just don't think it is the end goal, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think it's actually the same where I am now. We have we reward the individual contributors. So, and again, because you do have that, you'll have people who are maybe the best sales rep, and then they're put into being a manager, and they're like, hang on a sec, what is happening? Like, what I was doing before doesn't work with these people, or they might not have the patience that, you know, to work with others that they do have themselves. So, yeah, I think just, I think exactly that, rewarding that individual contributor with what they're doing in their own right is really important.
I think like in the startup world, if one wants to think like how do you become a leader, I think there's lots of things you can do. Like for example, what you're doing, like you're organising these events, like in whatever type of industry you're in, you can start organising events about a particular topic, you can start writing about it, and I think that's a form of leadership if you're the person that is delivering quality content about a particular topic. And if you do that consistently, people will start following it, and people will actually start reaching out to you. So like people reach out to me sometimes now about stuff that in the accommodation world to do with like shared living and stuff, and that's because Remigo is a platform all about shared living. Plus also I comment quite a bit on like the whole co-living kind of growing trend in the real estate world. So you can make yourself a leader by just going out there and you know, just create an event.
Keys, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, cool. I'll get out to you now in 2 seconds after the next question. So for people who've moved around maybe a little bit more than yourself, Becky, how do you know when, or even after Oracle, how do you know when it's time to move on? When it's like, you might have this misplaced sense of loyalty to your company that they're not giving back. How do you know when it's time to move on? Or even if just a new challenge, which, how do you kind of figure that out?
So I think you always kind of know, to be honest with you. It's like it's not working, you kind of feel it. I think as well you kind of have to look and see, you know, where's the organisation going? Is that something you buy into yourself, you know? Is that something that you think, I remember years ago being in an organisation and the CEO saying, these are our figures, and I remember thinking, I'm never going to hit those figures, you know? And I remember thinking, that day I mentally said, I'm not going to hang around for this. And that was the right thing, because then there was redundancies and I left. I didn't get redundancy pay, but I was fine with that because it was just a terrible atmosphere for a year. It wouldn't have been worth it to me. But I think you kind of have to see, do you believe in where it's all going? And if you don't, then I think that's the sign, really, you know?
But I think like the people you work for is really important. So if I think about all my friends, including like me, like everybody I know has had like somebody that they really didn't like working for, and the best people like are the kind of people that they really liked working for. So I have two mentors, two of my best mentors I actually worked for, and I think the biggest mistake, if I think about all my friends, is like staying at an organisation too long where like you're working for somebody that where it's just not working. You know it's not working. There's no point in staying. Just move on ASAP or work with a different team. And I think that's the mistake that just almost everybody I know has made it. They just stuck it out. It's like don't stick it out and move on.
Yeah, that's very true.
I think from my perspective, you're not learning anything anymore. You're going through the motions and thinking like that this isn't challenging me anymore. I'm kind of bored. Then that's not the place for you anymore. It's giving you what you needed, and it's now time to take that with you and move on somewhere else. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi. I'm really interested in mindset. It's something that I think about a lot. I've read a lot of Carl Dweck and Brene Brown, who alluded to the arena, so I imagine you've read it too,
Yeah.
or heard her speak. But this is probably more towards Ed and Ciara about having a startup and being a startup and having that mindset to keep going, but most importantly, what keeps you motivated to keep going?
It's hard to like describe it. I think I'm quite a driven person. I'm quite a self-motivated person, so that helps. I believe like in what I'm doing. You have to believe in what you're doing, and I think I'm actually trying to like improve an industry or a situation within an industry, so that's motivating. At the same time, like sometimes you just like you're not going to be 100% motivated all the time. You're not just going to feel amazing. Like there are downs, and I think having like mentors, 1 or 2 mentors that can help. Just sometimes even just say someone that says keep going, assuming that you're going in the right direction. So just to have a little bit of support from friends or mentors or colleagues can make a huge difference. But I think fundamentally you have to be kind of quite self-driven, because if nobody can make you do it, you just have to be driven as well. But everybody's a human being, and I think it doesn't matter who the person is. Like everybody needs a bit of support.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I love Carol Dweck's book. I think it's a great book actually. It's really good. And I have to say I do love what I do, and I really believe what I do. So that definitely gets me out of bed in the morning, But I think as well, starting a company, it's not that big a deal. I think for a long time I wanted to start my own company and I didn't do it. And now I regret not doing it earlier. Now, the flip side, if I had done it earlier, I wouldn't have the network I had from working for longer. But at the same time, it's all just things you have to tick off the list. At the end of the day, open a bank account. It's all totally doable, So don't think it's this big thing out here that can't be done. It's very doable. And I think that the other thing that I find hugely helpful is I do have a peer group of people with their own companies, and we do get together, and I just find that really helpful. And we're all on the same WhatsApps and stuff like that, and I just think, that's brilliant. For me anyway, that's brilliant.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question regarding the timing of founding or really becoming an entrepreneur and doing your own thing. Because it's hard when you're in a current role, you're like an individual contributor or a manager, you're like really focusing on getting these things done, but you start having an idea. How did you measure like, okay, it's worth it going there? Did you talk to those mentors? You went to a pitch or something to compare this idea, or how do you make sure like, okay, it's gonna land and I'm gonna start this?
Will I answer? There are different programs you can do. Mm-hmm. So there's one program called the Founders Institute, which is on in the evenings, and I was actually mentoring a founder in the Founders Institute. She just asked me, like, when I meet her kind of once a month or something, about her startup, and she had this startup idea. She was really passionate about it. And so she decided to do the Founder Institute. She had a really good job in Facebook as well. And she spent a very small amount of money getting a website built. She got the website out into the market. And she decided not to continue. And I think she might have sold the start to somebody else. But instead of in that situation, instead of spending an absolute fortune getting the website done and quitting your job, she was able to go through the program, which is on in the evenings, test it, get market feedback, get a cheap product out quickly rather than spending a fortune. And in that particular situation, she decided the right move was to continue with her role, and maybe she'll do something else in the future. So there are things you can do. You can reach out to other founders, and you can there are the programs like the Founders Institute that can help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's good advice. And I know when I started, I did New Frontiers Phase 1, which is part-time, and you do it in the evenings. So I think that's quite good. And I think as well, you really have to you need to look at your incomings and your outgoings, you know. I kind of think I was helped by the fact of the recession because like we really like our household budget, like we took a hammering during the recession. So then we kind of learned to live, then we just didn't have that money, so then we kind of learned to live without it, if that makes sense. So then when I started my own business, I wasn't giving up a huge salary because I had taken time out and I'd been at home with the kids. So it was easier in that way. Whereas I think if you have a really good job, and I think as well you have to be careful, like I've worked for Accenture in the past, everyone's like, oh my god, Accenture, that's amazing. And you're just like, but it could be a handcuff, you know what I mean? Like it's really good money and your mum's delighted to tell everyone you work for Accenture. You know what I mean? Like these are the things, like, and it's really hard. So you've left to do what? Oh, to do what? Like, you know, it's really hard. And sometimes, like the hardest thing I ever did when I started my business was change my LinkedIn profile to, I'm no longer this person anymore, I'm now doing this. And that is, but I didn't do that for ages because it was so hard. And I always couldn't look at the screen. I was like that. You know? So I think New Frontiers Facebook is good, but I got refused from that 4 times. So you know you might have to go back a few times.
If you want to tell them,
Well, no, I haven't started my own company yet. I'll talk to you guys after.
So one last one from me. So like looking back on your own journey and where you are now, what key, it was any bit of advice that you would give yourself back then maybe that you didn't know now when you're starting out in the tech world?
For me, I think having confidence in myself is really, really important. I think when you start in tech, and I don't want to call it a female thing, I think it was just an inexperienced thing of being in a meeting and maybe not 100% having confidence in my own opinion or wanting to step up and say something. My advice to myself or anybody starting in a career is to say it. Say it and be heard and have your opinion out there and put yourself out there because it will be rewarded for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that absolutely, and just maybe just experiment faster. Don't be afraid of failure when you're experimenting, because I think initially when you put yourself out there, like you've changed your LinkedIn and it's a kind of an unusual situation that you're in, and you kind of actually have to not be afraid, like to put questions out there, ask people stuff, reach out to people quite relentlessly. And I think in the beginning it can be difficult for someone who is new to the journey because they don't want to feel stupid, or they might want to announce to the world that they're doing something because they'll feel that they might feel that if it doesn't work, it reflects badly. Nobody cares. Everybody just wants people to, kind of succeed. So, yeah.
So I don't know. I suppose looking back, I think I'm probably trying to enjoy it more, if that makes sense. I think your career goes through cycles. Like I had cycles where I was traveling a huge amount, cycles when I was managing large teams. And I'm in a different place, and I think probably just enjoy it and see the longevity of it, and that what you're doing now mightn't be what you're going to be doing in 10 years' time. And not to get, I was always kind of frustrated, and even now I'd be frustrated I'm not doing things fast enough or not doing things enough, but you kind of have to enjoy where you are as well.
Yeah, cool. That's all from me. Have we any questions out here from anyone?
Yeah. You're talking about a lot about mentorship, and you have a peer group, in your own company. What happens when they turn around and say to you that that's a crap idea, or no, that's no good? Do you go back and say to them, is there a two-way conversation, or is it just that's a mentor, that's a peer group? You know what I mean?
I think that everybody has, in the startup world, there are a range of different mentors. I mean, it doesn't matter what your idea is or what your business is. Some people won't like it no matter what. Some people will love it. Some people will be indifferent. I think what you have to try to do is find people with a particular skill set. So if it's like finance, talk to the person that's an expert in finance about finance. And if someone who knows absolutely nothing about finance is telling you something totally different, you just ignore that person. So some people you kind of have to understand what they don't know, and I think you just have to find the people that are experts in a particular area. And most of the time, if you've got good mentors, you will get good advice. But it's you're not going to 100% of the time agree with people. It just doesn't work that way. So you try to learn, and you just try to take the good and the constructive feedback, basically.
Just getting context on the feedback
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Where they're coming from, and then
Yeah,
trying to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they say something's crap, it's like, well, tell good feedback should always be specific anyway. So it's like, okay, well, tell me, what exactly did you not like, and but it's really important to be open to said feedback and not shut it down.
Like I have a whole,
Yeah.
like I have a whole bunch of ideas, like kind of an ideas person. And I was talking to like my mentor today, and he was like, "Yeah, just stop thinking about all these ideas, just focus." And I was like, "Yeah, actually, you're right."
Yeah.
So you just get different feedback.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, I think you made the point, where is it coming from? Like, why are they saying it's rubbish? Maybe it is rubbish, you know what I mean? Just in terms of like, you can live in your own little startup bubble and you can think, oh, this is going to be amazing, but, is there a market for it? Is it going to make money? That kind of a thing. Or is somebody just, like where they're coming from, like in their heart sounds a bit emotional, but do you know what I mean? Like, why are they doing it to be kind so that you don't waste a lot of time and energy on something? Or are they doing it because they just really haven't understood and they don't really care about it? That's it. And that's the other thing, is I would be very cautious of people. Like when I started my business, some people would be like, tell me about your business in 2 minutes. And then they'd give an opinion on it. And like, that is nonsense. I never give an opinion on anyone's business. Because like, you don't understand it. And that's like, you know what I mean? Like, lots of people have an opinion, but it's a knowledgeable opinion is what you want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anything else from out here? Alright folks, we're at time. LinkedIn or Instagram Live is about to cut off now in about 2 minutes, so we're going to wrap it up there. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Obviously, thanks to the speakers for joining as well. We have the place until around 7:45, so we're going to stick around for a bit of a chat. And if anyone wants to go for a pint, we might tip along across to Kennedy's for half an hour for a drink or two if you're around for that. But yeah, so thanks for everyone for coming, and just a round of applause for speakers as well.